it's Meg at SPKN, the Sport Professional Knowledge Network. Joining us today is Linda Flanagan, a journalist, author, and former cross-country and track coach with a rare blend of experience across athletics, journalism, and policy research. Receiving degrees from Lehigh, Oxford, and the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Linda brings both academic depth and real-world perspective to our conversation. Drawing on her background as a competitive runner, longtime coach, and parent, she examines how pressure, money, and rising expectations are reshaping youth sports. Linda is the author of Take Back the Game, and it's clear that her focus is restoring balance, perspective, and joy to youth sports. Linda, welcome to Unspoken Knowledge.
Oh, thanks for having me. You really summed it up very, very well, Meg. You summed up my background and perspective perfectly.
Good. Well, let's go back to the start, back to the beginning. You had a career that spans journalism, policy research, and coaching. Where did the journey begin?
First, I've always been interested in writing, and I've always kind of enjoyed putting the pen to the page, or now with my fingertips on a keyboard. So that's kind of been a constant. And so have athletics been a constant. Since I was very young, I just was into movement and exercise and play, like playing catch, playing this, not necessarily organized, but a lot of play. And then as well, some organized sports as I got older. I think maybe sixth grade was my first team, which is like outlandishly old at this point. It was a softball team. And then I played tennis and so I was just very active, and also took up running when I was in high school and ran on my own, but then ran in college, and then I ran in graduate school because I ran in England, and they don't have the whole, quagmire of regulations that we have here, which, is all in flux. But anyway, I could just run on their team and enjoy that experience. And my writing has been about on a variety of subjects. I'm a freelance writer, but I tend to gravitate towards those subjects that interest me. And athletics and sports have been a big part of that because I've seen so many different sides of it and experienced so many different sides of it, particularly when I became a coach and saw how the universe had changed. And, meanwhile, it's changed dramatically even since then. But what I was experiencing as a coach, a high school coach, I could see that it had already gotten kind of warped, and that it made me think, well, what are we really doing here? And that's only persisted or gotten worse or deepened, I guess. Some people would say it isn't worse. I don't think it's wonderful, but those pressures and outside forces have intensified.
That's for sure. I don't know if you know this, but I was a tennis player growing up, and I started when I, was 5. And by the time I was 10, I was playing almost 9 hours a day. Oh. Junior high school, I was out with voluntary and was training.
In Florida? Were you in Florida?
Yeah. What is now IMG.
Yes,
so I was one of his first out in Bradenton. So it was a very interesting experience. And at the time, it seemed quite unique. And now it seems like I was slacking.
10 hours a day. That's just amazing, And look at you. You're all grown up and normal.
Well, that's debatable. Yeah. But and then I had my daughter was a D1 soccer player, and my son was a D1 basketball coach. And I tell you, it has changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. It has been, and I think it's just, I look at my friends who have younger kids who are going through it now.
Yes.
There's so much stress. And it's not just because the parents are so involved now. It's not just what your parents think. It's what all the kids' parents think. Have you kind of noticed that too? That it's a bigger input.
Well, I think part of that is social media, that we're all more aware of what everyone else is doing and what other kids are doing. And, you can't get away from the fact that sports are a competitive endeavor. And I think the parents are often competitive. So it becomes this kind of like the subtext of all of this is like, whose kid's doing more? Who's better? Should we be doing that or no? And then it trickles into your own family and your own conversations. Like, well, have you thought about trying that special program that our neighbor's doing? I mean, I think it's very insidious. And I think much of that is related to social media and the posting of stats and accomplishments. In all my parent talks, it's like do the world a favor and don't post your child's achievements. It just doesn't help anybody. It helps no one. Yeah. And it contributes to that mentality of like, it's a race that we have to get into this stuff and it's a zero-sum game and your child does well, mine doesn't. And it's just, it's not healthy.
Dr. Jay Coakley
yes.
said once, he said, you started out, when he was an athlete and it's like, oh, you must be so proud of your kids, you're so lucky to have an athlete, such a great athlete. And it became, how did you create? So he's,
yes.
The Williams sisters and Tiger Woods,
yeah.
and their parents' books selling more than the athletes. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of took a turn. When did you notice that kind of shift?
I suppose really when I started coaching, I noticed it more intensely actually in myself, and it made me question what I was doing, because I noticed that I cared a lot with my own son, who was very good and just natural sort of, out there and kind of a standout. I noticed how much I cared and I thought it was kind of weird. I noticed that I cared and that it was sort of like a little bit of a status boost to have this like good athlete out there. And if you pay attention to kind of like the sidelines and what's happening, and like everyone looks up to the parents whose children are really good, it's like, wow, what are they doing right? And they have higher status. It's like, it's one of those nebulous things. You can't really define it very easily, but to me it was unmistakable. And I felt it myself when my son did well and like having a little strut in my step. And it's so obnoxious. Oh my God. So obnoxious and silly, because it has really very little to do with, your child's performance out there is a function of whatever they are born with. So maybe your genes to some extent, getting out of the way and letting them play. But, I think taking a lot of credit for your child's athletic achievements is a fool's game, because then you got to step up and take blame when it all collapses. And,
yeah,
that can very likely happen in many cases. And they're going to lose and have bad games throughout. So anyway, but I started noticing that really when I was a younger parent and saw the kind of weird dynamics on the sidelines and how the elevated stature of the parents of the good athletes, how I felt sort of kind of pretty cool when my son did well. And I contrasted that with how I thought I had been raised. Like I never sensed that with my own parents, that their sense of satisfaction or well-being as parents had much to do with how I performed. I mean, they wanted me to do well, of course, and came to my games when they could, but I never had the sense that it really mattered deeply to them whether or not I was a starter or any of that sort of thing. And so I was just curious about the tension and that difference. And, I think it's been a gradual shift, so that to the point where children are like kind of the centerpiece of family life, and their achievements are a reflection of parents. I think they always have been to some extent. I think it's elevated now. It has been for the last 20 or 30 years.
Remember after school sports? That kind of frames I know we still have them, but it frames the way I kind of think of sports before, where even as competitive as I was, my parents didn't go to everything. And I don't know about you, and I have to admit it too. We're coming clean here. I did the same thing with my kids. When I finally realized it, I tried to get my daughter not to play D1. It's like, just do anything. Just don't do that.
Wait, when you finally realized what, Meg?
I think when I finally realized how I was acting and how, even though one of the most important things to me was to not put pressure on I didn't want them to have the life I had. I didn't want them to go through what I went through. And I wanted them to enjoy sports. And when I realized that not only had it gotten to the point where I had been, spending so much time doing my sport, it's gotten more than that. Yes. And especially in college, it really bothers me that they tell you when to sleep, eat, what to eat. You're not making any decisions at all.
You have no autonomy.
No. And it's really, I find that the athletes that I engage with who have just come out of college programs that are trying to find what their next step is going to be, their identity really suffers because they have not, and they've got this learned helplessness.
Yes.
That the programs have actually it used to be we go into sports to get accountability. We used to go, you know what I mean?
Yes, right.
So I think when I realized that, I was like, wait a minute, I learned some great lessons from sports.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what is happening now.
Mm-hmm. And
that's why I think between that and the fact that the coaches used to be, PE teachers and they understood, physical literacy and all of that. They went from, where did you study to where did you play? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of athletes started becoming, I've got a whole philosophy on that I won't go into, but there's, they're not getting the lessons that I think are so incredibly wonderful that you can easily get from sports. It's such a great vehicle for that.
Yes. And I really have struggled with that too. And I've been thinking a lot about sports and character building. Mm-hmm. And, I think many parents, probably you included, wanted your child or thought this is one of the advantages of being on a team, that, you have some accountability to your team and your teammates and your coach. And, of course, there's the discipline and the work and all that, but it's also like this sort of obligation to others. And I think that has been eroded.
Yeah.
The way our culture has developed so that starting when they're even very young and we, put 9-year-olds on different ability teams, so all the really good 9-year-olds can play on one team and not to be confused with the poor slobs on the C team. That's kind of like not a great lesson when you're 9, when you're a child. And then also as they develop in high school, and when they're on clubs and there's this conflict between the club and the high school, and maybe they're not even allowed to play on their high school team. It's really not about the group or the unit. It becomes increasingly about your own individual stats. Mm-hmm. What can you do to impress a coach? Now we have the added lure of NIL deals, which is going to, there's going to be a big warping effect from that as well. So, there's all these like countervailing forces which undermine, in my view, what sports are really about and why we have historically wanted them for our kids, because of these lessons beyond, how to kick a ball or run fast or whatever it is. It's about these other things. But anyway, that's
you were a really good runner. You actually started a women's track program at your school, is that right?
Yes, with a very good friend, and I have to give her credit because she really led the charge and kind of dragged me along because she was ahead, just more advanced in some ways. But she knew about Title IX and like, why don't we have a girls' team? We had a girls' club or something. It was like vaguely attached to the boys' team, and we lobbied the administration. And by the time I graduated, we had an official team. And now it's a Division I women's cross country and track program. And it's competitive and it's good. So it shows you how old I am that was not fully enforced. Because people think Title IX was passed in 1972, and then suddenly all these women's programs. No, but it like took a little while. Yeah. and they were dragging their heels on it until there was sufficient demand. And it's a catch-22 because there is more demand when you have an official program. But anyway,
very true. Well, so how do you think your competitive running and long-term like coach experience, how did that influence the way that you saw sport culture evolving? I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but.
Well, I guess I have so much valued my athletic life, and what it has, it's especially, and I know I've been a runner for so long. I figured one time I calculated, I think I've run around the world 3.5 times or something like that. A rough calculation of my mileage, which is a lot less than many people do. But I used to run like 50 miles a week, for years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
And sometimes more miles. And I felt that it has been so essential to my well-being, not only my physical health, but just for peace of mind and like being able to think, and for friendship. Everybody knows this. This is what sports do. You make great friends, you feel better, you have this discipline and structure, and it just seems like such a wonderful life hobby or interest. And that's really why I wanted to become a coach, because I thought, well, this will be great. I can get these other and some more girls interested in something that they can develop and have this wonderful life hobby. And I learned that it had just really changed. It just became sort of, and increasingly, I haven't coached in 6 years, and when I started in like 2002 or something, it was obviously a lot less intense. But even then, there was more of a focus on what can the sport do for me? How can it help me get into a better college? And I just kind of bemoan that. I think that's kind of a loss.
Yeah. It's funny. And I think the kids learn that after they graduate from college and they move somewhere new.
Mm-hmm.
And I meet people. You can join a gym, or but sports are the best way to meet people and kind of get a new friend group that are interested in the same thing that you're interested in.
Yes.
It is such a catalyst for sure.
It is. And, there's something about doing hard things together I found is so enriching and bonding. And I read about a little bit in the book about how it was always on the worst weather days when it was like torrential rain or, mostly torrential rain. We didn't go out in thunderstorms or snowstorms, but when the girls did their workouts, it was like that they were so jubilant after those workouts because they'd done something hard in a difficult environment. And it was like people would look at them like, wow, I can't believe you did that. And it's just very, it builds confidence, I just saw these young women I coached, like they were girls, call them young women. They were teenage girls, and they just felt, you could see it lifted their spirits. And there's nothing like sports to do that, in my opinion. Okay, I don't know the entire universe, but I felt very strongly that that's one of the great advantages of sports.
Yeah, I had a similar experience where I was doing research and I started working with a young basketball team of boys, freshman boys, so small group, but I was teaching them kind of coping mechanisms, and I was framing it around, you'll make your free throws. This is how we, mental tools that you can calm yourself and focus. Mm-hmm. Everything. And I was so floored how quickly, because they wanted to be like Steph Curry, mm-hmm. they would adopt these coping mechanisms that take so much longer when you're talking about general anxiety disorders or, that sort of thing. They embraced them because it wasn't about their brain being broken. It was mm-hmm. about, their performance and wanting to be the best they can be. Mm-hmm. And the next day, even, I had players coming and saying, "Hey, coach, I tried that with my test today, and it totally worked."
Yes.
And you didn't have to tell them that; they just knew it.
Yeah.
So I think that really encapsulates for me how sports are such an incredible vehicle for learning things.
Yes.
It makes it so much easier.
Yes. Well, and I think that every game or competition is like a little life experience, and it's a little laboratory for trying out different things. You lose and you're devastated, and then the next day you get back and you have to start over. You have to do it again, and you might have a fantastic experience, a terrific game, you hit a grand slam, and then next day you're just back at it, and you're in class or you're out practicing, and there's so much to be said for that. Yeah. And the other great thing about sports is, which I think is often forgotten, is they really don't matter. They're not important. They're utterly insignificant. They're in and of themselves. A game does not matter. Yeah. It matters to you when you're experiencing it. It can help you grow, and it's nice to have a winning record and all that. But it's in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that's where because you can take so many risks in that environment. Then, as long as you recognize that this is a made up game we're playing. It's a made up game, and that's it.